Hello, everybody. Great to have you here today. We will give a couple of minutes for people to join us. Hey. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Ayelet Fishbach, professor here at Chicago booth. This is the fourth Faculty Fireside presented by Chicago booth. It's a series that I'm delighted to be a part of. With me today, I have Greg Hodge, Yvonne Chebib, and Babatunde, how do I pronounce your last name, Tunde? Can you help me?
Fajemirokun.
What he said. Okay, and very happy to be with you. What we are going to do is hear a little bit about my work. I have recently published a book that talks about the work that I've been doing on the science of motivation, and then we are going to have a conversation with our amazing panelists. So let me share my screen. Here we go. And let me tell you a little bit about work in motivation science and how to get things done. I have been a motivation scientist for a really long time. And what I observed in my career here at Booth and in the field of motivation is an explosion of ideas. Basically between behavioral economics and social psychology. The last couple of decades were amazing. There was so much that has been done. We learned so much about how to motivate people, how to motivate ourselves, so that a couple of years ago, I thought, okay, I need to organize this knowledge. Like it's like a massive room full with hidden treasures that needs to put into order. And as I was sitting and just organizing all these amazing interventions that we discovered, I found that they nicely fit into 4 buckets. Basically, we see that motivation science design interventions to help people set goals in a better way. They choose their goals wisely and then set them such that they are motivating, that they are pulling people toward them. We have strategies that help people sustain the motivation. So, looking back at what you have achieved, looking ahead, monitoring progress, learning from feedback, delivering feedback. We have interventions that address multiple goals, how to find the right balance in people's lives, how to overcome temptations, how to engage in self-control dilemmas. And then the last part, we developed strategies that help people use social support and rely on other people at work and in their life to achieve their goals. And so what I thought to do in the first part of our conversation today is tell you a bit about the discoveries in each of these buckets, and really the idea with getting things done, okay, is to address each of them, okay, to know that all these elements need to be in place in order to be successful. So let me start with setting a goal. And now I like to use the example of getting to the top of Mount Everest. Here you can see a long line of people waiting for their turn to be exactly here, which is the summit of Mount Everest. And this is a highly motivating goal for mountaineers. Partially because it is a goal, it is not a chore, it is not a means to a goal. If you are a mountaineer, you want to achieve that, not because you are training for another mountain, it is the thing. There is a very clear target. You want to be exactly in the spot that is defined at the summit of Mount Everest. There are high incentives if you manage to do it, you are going to be a popular speaker, and your social network will admire you. And it is intrinsically motivating. That is, people get satisfaction from doing the thing, not just from achieving the thing. And each one of these elements create a goal that is powerful, create a good, strong goal. So how does that inform research and interventions? Well, here's one example. Okay, I mentioned that getting to the summit of Mount Everest is a goal, is not a chore, is not a means to another goal. And indeed, people don't like to invest in means. Okay? People don't like to pay for shipping, for gift wrapping, for parking. As you know, you might drive around the block a few times to find cheap parking. And then once you're in the restaurant that you were trying to get to, you will not hesitate paying the same amount that you just saved on parking for another cocktail. You would not think twice. So here's an example for a study that demonstrates this point with Franklin Shaddy, who back then was a PhD at Chicago Booth, and our friend Richard Thaler just came out with Misbehaving. We auctioned it to our MBA students. We auctioned the book. Some people were bidding on the book alone, and the average bid was $23. Another group of people that were unaware of the first group were bidding of a Chicago Booth tote bag that contained the same book. And they knew it. They saw that the nice tote bag and the book inside, and they were asked to bid on the tote bag. Their average bid was only $12. Okay? Basically, they're getting more, but they are willing to pay less. The value of the tote bag in economics terms is negative. It is negative $11. How is that possible? Well, people don't like to pay for gift wrapping. People don't like to pay for the bag that will carry the book. What else do we know about goal setting? Intrinsic motivation really matters. Okay? People are excited to pursue goals that have immediate rewards, that are enjoyable to pursue. If you measure how important is a goal for a person and how much they get pleasure from pursuing it, guess what? The pleasure, the intrinsic motivation, the feeling that this is the right thing for me to do is a better predictor of persistence. We see this with New Year's resolutions. Okay, we have now followed people over an entire year. So they set the resolutions in January, and then we follow up every few months after up to the following November. And what we find is that the extent to which people say this is something that I enjoy doing predicts their persistence more than the extent to which they say this is something that is important for me. Now, notice, no one sets a New Year's resolution because they can't think about something more pleasurable to do, okay? No one sets a New Year's resolution to watch more TV or eat more ice cream. Okay, people set resolutions to exercise more, to eat better, to do better at work, things that they want to do because they're important for them, because there's some long-term benefit. Yet the immediate pleasure, okay, the individual differences between how much one person likes doing it and the other person does not like doing it, that's what predicts stamina, that's what predicts persistence. Same for how much time people spend on studying or exercising, same for consumption of healthy food. People decide to eat certain foods if they like these foods, if they know how to prepare them in a way that they will enjoy them, they will eat these foods. If they don't enjoy the foods, they will persist for maybe a week or two and then drop the goal. Okay, so we find that intrinsic motivation really matters, and that if you bring intrinsic motivation to the goal, that is, if you make it more enjoyable at the moment, you have better chances. We find that when we let children listen to music while they were doing their homework. We find that when we encourage the adults to find the healthy food that they enjoy, the exercise routine that brings them pleasure, or the study materials that are most interesting for them. Do people know that? Do people know that intrinsic motivation is what predicts persistence? Well, not really. Okay? We mispredict how much our future self will care to get value from what they do at the moment. Okay? Enjoy what they do as they do that. Every year, I ask my MBA students to say how much intrinsic motivation, that is doing something interesting with people that you like, matters for your current job, and how much it will matter for your future job. And people consistently tell me that right now it's critical, but I don't think it will be that important in the future. We mispredict how much intrinsic motivation will matter for us in the future. Here's a study in which we brought this to the lab. This is with Caitlin Mullin, now at Cornell, back then in Chicago. We invited students to choose between two tasks: listening to the song Hey Jude by the Beatles or a loud alarm. Sounds like a no-brainer. Who would like to listen to a loud alarm? But we paid people more for the loud alarm. Okay, so they were choosing between two jobs, okay, one that is nicer and one that pays more. And because they came to our experiments to make money, the majority of them went for the job that paid more, which was the loud alarm. But guess what? The people who chose the loud alarm were much more likely to regret. The majority of them regretted their choice, whereas the people that chose the nice song by the Beatles, well, they did not regret their choice. So we tend to mispredict how much we will care for intrinsic motivation. We tend to think that our future self is going to do only what's important for them and not what they enjoy. We also mispredict others, by the way. We tend to think that other people are less concerned about doing something that they love with the people that they like and are more motivated by long-term benefits. That leads me to say something about incentives. A lot of the research in motivation science is on incentives. I believe that the field of behavioral economics is a bit obsessed with incentives, and the field of psychology started with studying incentives with animals. And so what have we discovered? Well, a ton, okay? One thing that we discovered is that you need to be very careful with your incentive system, because you might incentivize the behavior that you did not mean to incentivize. In my book, I refer to the Hanoi rat massacre. This is a story that happened at the beginning of the 20th century when French colonists designed a bounty system. Trying to get rid of the rats in Hanoi, they offered 1 cent per rat killed. Basically, the residents had to bring the tail of the rat that they supposedly killed and get a cent. Well, guess what? If you make money out of dead rats, then you need to breed rats. And that's exactly what the residents of Hanoi started doing, breeding rats so that they can get the money. This effect was some years later named the Cobra effect, after a similar failed program to eliminate cobras in India. If you pay people for a dead cobra, well, you incentivize breeding cobras. Let's say a few things about how to sustain motivation, how to help people get from here to there. So you set a goal, it's motivating, it's intrinsic, there is a clear target, it's not a means, it's a goal. How do you motivate the way there? What we know is that progress increases motivation. So about half of the people in the US that start college will not get a college degree. They will drop out in the process. It's interesting to know that most of them will drop out in the first or second year. Okay, very few will drop out when they are about to complete their college degree. Okay, same for loyalty programs. You start a loyalty program, it's very likely that you will forget about it after the first purchase. when you're one purchase away from getting the reward, you will remember to use this, okay, to make this purchase and get the reward. Why is that? Well, for all or nothing goals, the last step is actually getting you more. Okay, your last year in college is getting you a full college degree. Your first year in college is only getting you a quarter of a college degree. But even for goals that don't have an end state, okay, such as like doing well at work or exercising, the more we do this, the more we feel committed. Okay, the more we feel that we can do it. Okay, it's in my power. It's something that I can do very well, and people become more enthusiastic, more motivated, more committed. But sometimes you see that with progress, people relax their efforts. In a way, they feel like they have done enough, and now it's time to take a break. I like this example of people that are using the escalator to get to the gym. Okay, while my gym doesn't have an escalator, it does have a parking lot, and I try to make sure that I park very close to the gym so that I don't accidentally walk more feet that I need to. Okay, that there is no extra distance that I take on the way to the gym, which, if you think about it, is ironic because obviously my goal is to exercise. Why would I mind the extra walking or climbing up the stairs? Well, we are all familiar with that. Sometimes when we feel that we have made progress or that we are about to make progress, it gives us a license to disengage with the goal, okay? To give up, not to think about it. Sometimes we feel depleted. I've already done enough, okay? Or I'm depleted in advance. It's going to be a long day, okay? I might as well not do much right now. That leads motivation scientists to think about when is it better to tell people about what they have done so that they are committed by thinking about how much they can do versus what is still missing so that they want to make progress, so that they realize that they are not quite there, that there is more than they can do. We refer to this as the glass half full versus half empty, and we don't really refer to optimism versus pessimism, but more as how you monitor progress. Do you tell yourself, this is how much I've been doing versus what's missing? And what we generally find is that for novices, it's better to highlight the glass half full or up to the midpoint, up to 50%, tell people how much they have achieved. And after that half point, for experts, tell them how much is missing. Okay, you are still that far from achieving your goal. Either way, we have a problem with the middle. Okay, so people are enthusiastic and motivated when they start on something. They are, again, very motivated when they are about to finish it. In the middle is where we see the middle problem. Okay, in the middle is where people kind of lose their motivation and find it harder to stick to their goals. Here's a study in which we asked Jewish participants in Israel whether they have lighted the menorah over the 8 days of the Hanukkah holiday. And if you're unfamiliar with the tradition, the thing that we need to do, which is very simple, is light the candles every night for 8 consecutive nights. And as you see, many people did it on the first night, the last night, but not so much in the middle. In another study, we found that people cut corners in the middle. That is, we gave people some paper and scissor, and on the paper they had shapes, and they had to cut them so that they do a good job and don't cut the corners of the shapes. They did a good job on the first and the last shapes. In the middle, they were cutting corners, literally cutting corners. And so people are less enthusiastic, and they are doing less of a good job in the middle. What do we do? Short middles. An annual exercising goal is not good, and so we make it a weekly exercise goal or a daily exercise goal. Saving for retirement is too far away, and so we think about an annual saving goal. or, a monthly sales goal. We make goals short so that there is not much of a middle. Learning from feedback is hard, in particular if the feedback is negative. Serena Williams told us that we should learn from not from victories by setbacks, that if winning is God's rewards and losing is how it teaches us. The Supreme Court Justice, I'm losing my words here, John Roberts, mentioned that in a graduation speech that he wished bad luck to the graduates from time to time so that they have something to learn from. These people remind us to learn from negative feedback because it is not intuitive, because it is hard. Now, negative feedback is part of life, okay? We all have setbacks, and how do we learn from this? Well, motivation science can help. Many of the strategies that we have developed target that. I have a long list here. Let me just mention a couple. Asking people who had a setback to give advice to another person, asking unemployed people to give advice to someone on how to get a job, asking people that are struggling with their finance or with anger management to give advice to someone on how to save or on how to control their temper. Reminded people that they know something, that they have learned from their setbacks, and help them stay motivated. Distancing also helps. Okay, growth mindset. Okay, thinking about how much you grew from your setbacks, from your failures, celebrating that. All strategies that help people learn from setbacks. Let me say a few things about multiple goals. And as you know, we all have multiple things that we want to do. We have multiple things that we want to do at any given moment. Kierkegaard, the philosopher, advised people to only will one thing. The less inspiring but more accurate psychological advice is to pick your battle. The first thing that we want people to do is decide whether they are looking to compromise or prioritize their goals. Okay? You compromise when you try to strike the right balance. Okay, maybe you want to find the right balance between having a career and family, between enjoying the nice environmental products in your grocery store and saving money by buying what's cheaper. You prioritize when you decide that one goal is ahead of another. Okay? You might decide that you prioritize your career over your family, so you will postpone starting a family, or that you prioritize your family over your career, so you're going to put your career on hold and focus on your family. Often when you prioritize, you are in a self-control conflict. You want to do one thing and push the other thing out of mind until you can achieve the goal that is higher priority. When we look at compromise, when we look at how people find the right balance between several goals, then we often advise them to find these multi-final means, these means that allow you to achieve several goals simultaneously. I, in my work, refer to it as feeding two birds with one scone, because I don't like killing birds. Basically, bring food from home that tends to be healthy, cheaper, and will save you time when it's lunchtime and you are hungry. We also talk about equifinal means. These means that all lead to the same goal. Okay, this is like the phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Okay, so, maybe you can exercise by biking, by running, by swimming. The advantage of finding the different ways in which you can achieve your goal, or helping people understand that there are different ways, is that there is more flexibility. There is more commitment. Sometimes we have self-control, I mentioned. Sometimes we want to prioritize. We did a lot of work on self-control. Let me say that self-control requires that you first identify a conflict and then resolve it. And so we want to help people see that there is a problem and then help them resolve the problem. How do we help people see that there is a problem? One way is to think about any decision in a broad decision frame. Think about doing it multiple times. Okay, my colleague here, Abby Sussman, did studies that show that when you remind consumers that exceptional expenses are not so exceptional, that you would want to go to a hotel for several nights this year, that you will buy champagne, not just once, that you go to the theater once in a while, that these are not just one in a time purchases, then people save more money. They are more financially responsible when making these purchases. We found the same with ethical dilemmas. When you remind people that you are going to be tempted to take a day off and call it a sick day several times this year, they are more likely to be ethical about the days off that they take. In terms of battling temptation, we find that reminding people in advance that it's going to be hard helps. Just like the person here who is physically prepared to lift a heavy box, if you know that the situation is going to be tense, if you know that there's going to be a lot of alcohol in the party, you are prepared in advance to address this. Let me just say a couple of things about designing social support before I open our conversation. We look at social support based in how we help people work as a group. This is the example of a group of people pulling the rope together, and in helping people through role models by doing something in the presence of others. This is the example of going to a gym class with other people so that they keep you motivated. When working with others, we see again that sometimes you want to tell people that other people are doing, okay? You want to highlight the glass half full, particularly if the group is not very committed. If the group is very committed, you want to highlight the glass that is half empty. You want to tell them what other people are not doing. When we look at individual goals, okay, like the gym class, like the role model, this is when we use conformity pressure. This is a typical electricity bill in the US. We tell people not just how much electricity they spend, but also about their neighbors and their efficient neighbor. We motivate behavior by reminding people what other people are doing. My very last point is about how motivation informs our relationships. And we now know that our goals and our relationships are very much go hand in hand. Instead of presenting more figures and data, let me tell you the story of Marie and Pierre Curie. This inspiring couple won the Nobel Prize in Physics and also told us some lessons on relationships. We connect to those who hold similar goals. Marie and Pierre met over their scientific interest. We help each other's goals. Pierre insisted that Marie will get their first Nobel Prize together with him. We help each other. We pursue shared goals. Marie and Pierre are famous for isolating polonium and radium together. And finally, we hold goals for others. Marie and Pierre had two daughters. Their oldest daughter, Yvonne, won her own Nobel Prize in physics, as is the tradition in that family. She won it with her husband. Their other daughter, the poor woman, did not win the Nobel Prize and married someone who did. Okay, so we support each other. We help each other achieving our goals. All right, this is just give you a sense of what I spend my life studying and what I summarized in Get It Done. Let me at this point move to our panel and open this conversation. Let me actually stop sharing our slides so we see our panel. And let me start with Greg, maybe. Greg, can you unmute yourself and tell us a bit about what you do and where motivation becomes part of what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Greg Hodge. I lead all go-to-market roles for executive search firm Russell Reynolds in Europe. So I mainly spend my time hiring for big, large organizations, chief marketing officers, chief digital officers, chief commercial officers, those types of roles. And I guess my job is consistently about goals. My clients usually want a double-horned unicorn. They want the best thing that's out there and doesn't exist. And my candidates obviously want to achieve that job. And so when you think about executive search as a process, the average search takes about 185 days. So you need to stay motivated for half a year. At any one time, I'm working probably on 10 searches. So that's over 1,000 days. And I'll probably see between 20 and 50 people for each job that we fill. And so I worked out, just as you were speaking, 98% of my time spent giving negative feedback, telling people they haven't got a job because only one person ever really gets the role. So goals are a constant part of what I do.
And any particular challenge, in the last couple of years or around the pandemic with doing that job?
I think the reality of the job has meant that the continued motivation has become more intense. The communication channels have become more intense. Your ability to have access to people is increased, and therefore how you manage people through a goal process has become much higher touch. And so you talk about kind of shorter goals or intrinsic goals and understanding those. I think one of the biggest things is intrinsic goals have become paramount. Mm-hmm. Money, most people would assume, would be the most important factor when changing jobs. But actually being closer to family, having something that has flexibility, enabling you to do some things has changed in terms of motivation for people. But in terms of actually managing the goals, the increased communication has really changed the role.
Yes, I agree. This is also my impression talking to management here. Also, Greg, when we talked before this meeting, you mentioned the tension between client and management goals. And I was interested in what you mentioned in that conversation. So I
guess it goes to kind of like your equifinal goals or the conflict in what the client may want and what is best for the candidate may not always be the same thing. And therefore, you're always trying to manage long-term goals and long-term expectations versus the tension point of what the client wants. And part of that, in your book, you talk about trying to understand the goal system, the sub-goals, and then ultimately the trade-offs and the prioritization. And the client will not always know the priorities that they want, and helping them understand that based on the candidate pool is key.
Yeah, thank you. In a way, sometimes there is a real tension, like the goals are different for the client and for management. Other times you feel like you need to educate the client about what they really need to want, okay, what their goals should be. So, many interesting questions there. I will move to Yvonne, but let's, the audience, please present your questions in the Q&A. You can ask me, you can ask any of our panelists. Yvonne, tell us a bit about what you do and where motivation becomes part of your job.
Thank you, Professor. And thanks for the exciting presentation as well. So my name is Yvonne Chebib. I look after the partner ecosystem for Microsoft. Before that, I was leading as well few large industries in the region. As you can see, like sales is part, Professor, of what I do. It's like driving the go-to-market and sales. And obviously with this, we have strategic goals, and how we take these strategic long-term goals as well into short-term goals, is 1 year, and like how we take the 1 year into some quarters. So one aspect of the motivation for us is three elements. One is sense of purpose, that the impact that we can drive to the business, to the people, part of my job, and to the country where we operate. The second sense of motivation is how we make it the long-term shorter, and like we monitor progress, and with that progress we see motivation, how far we are from our target, short-term target, and like long-term goals. The other element in motivation that I as well believe in is that incentives drives behavior, and to make some people work on something where they are not incentivized. And so my way of looking at it and motivation is really to look at a sense of purpose that can drive them. And here is how I can get to their intrinsic motivation and tap into it to make them work on and motivated for some elements that they don't get incentivized on.
So Let me ask about this part on incentives. We all believe that incentives influence behavior. What we are sometimes concerned is whether we are incentivizing the right thing, and maybe the incentive changes how people think about the problem. So, when you say that you have good experience with incentives, do you give me an example? What do you mean?
No, but there is, so, okay, I believe incentive drives behavior. The way you incentivize people is the way they first will go and focus, especially in business, the way they will go and focus in driving their revenue. I totally agree with the example of it has to be smart, because if we put an incentive that can drive bad behavior, incentive can drive bad behavior, but in general, it drives behavior. So if it's not a smart incentive, it can drive the wrong behavior as well.
Yes, so I completely agree with you, and I think that incentives matter. I think that we find that incentives often have more risky when we incentivize something that we did not used to incentivize before. Okay, when people are not sure why they are being incentivized. I would add that people sometimes think that incentives kill intrinsic motivation, and this is not the case. Okay, artists are more excited about doing their art when someone is willing to pay for it. Okay, so same for us. Okay, we are more excited about doing our job when we are successful, and we see that partially through our paycheck. And so incentives can work. They can increase intrinsic motivation. But if we incentivize the wrong thing, if we incentivize people for something they did not expect to be incentivized, this is where we see the problem. And so it's really about being very thoughtful and smart with your incentives. Let me move to Tunda. We haven't heard from you yet, so please unmute yourself and tell us what you do and what have you learned about motivation or hope to learn.
Okay, thanks, everyone. My name is Babatunde Fajemirokun. I lead ICO Insurance and based in Lagos, Nigeria, a former subsidiary of AIG. I'm the CEO, a role I assumed 3 years ago. So we do life, general insurance, and asset management. In terms of motivation and goals, obviously, as a CEO, the objective of a for-profit firm is to maximize long-term value, right? And what I find many times is conflicting interests, I suppose. I have to get everyone aligned towards the same objective of long-term value for the firm or for shareholders, when in actual case, you have different stakeholders. One of the issues that I particularly face, and when I read the book, was really trying to apply some of the problems that I've faced in my role. And legacy-wise, we've always been a life player. So most of the profits come from the life side of the business. The general side of the business is also quite big, but doesn't give as much profit. So what we find, especially when I went through, pursuing goals with others, I think chapter 13, is free riding and social loafing, the social disease of people feeling that, profit is coming from life. So we're fine, and we should also benefit individually from the value created on one side of the business. So I think one of the key things is really trying to get everyone to be committed in the same way in order to provide value to the whole. I would say that's probably one of my greatest challenges right now. And I'm hoping to apply some of the principles I've learned here in the book going forward.
Can I ask you to give an example for why is it right now a challenge? Can you share some details?
Okay, so the life side of the business is a bit more volatile, and the other side of the business is actually less volatile. So if we can contribute more profit from the other side, then we start to diversify the business a lot better. And I believe that would create more long-term value for shareholders. But currently, what we find is that because profits are essentially driven by one side of the business, the other side are not necessarily pulling their weight. I've applied principles like in the book, incentives, as noted by Yvonne. Incentives worked, but I think in some cases, I probably had the Cobra effect as well, largely because people are looking to maximize their own value rather than the value for the entire firm. So there's obviously a need to revise the way the incentives are also developed. So those are some of the challenges I would say that I experienced.
Yes, and this is often a problem that we see with incentives, with also with promotions, with recognition that the person that is contributing to the group, that is helping the group perform well. This is often harder to see and harder to incentivize, and we know that there is it's a social loafing. Okay, people work less hard when they're in a group. Okay, I had the slide of people pulling a rope together. We know that when we pull a rope together, it's like being on a two-person kayak. You don't work as hard as if you're doing the job by yourself. And the interventions that we often apply are meant to be able to identify how much each person contributed. Okay, so when someone is helping the group, we need to have a mechanism of seeing that contribution, of being able to measure it, of being able to promote and reward people for working as a group. Okay? So these are really interesting issues. We got some questions from our audience. So let me try to address one of them, and then maybe direct to my panelists the other one, and then we can go from there. Ulf Angeline asked whether I can elaborate on when to use one strategy versus another here. Okay, that question was specifically about this slide and thinking about multi-final and equi-final means. So a bit more elaboration here. When we help people identify an activity that helps them achieve several goals, that usually leads to an increase in motivation, to feeling that you achieve more, that you can maximize your attainment. That is in particular important when there are limited resources. Limited resources can come from the fact that you're in particular busy person, you're in a very busy period in your life because of your role in the organization, because your family situation, or you might have fewer resources because we see this with aging, or like when people have some health issues that they need to deal with. And every time resources are limited, we focus more on how can you achieve more with one activity. The other structure where we have several activities that all lead to the same goal, well, this is when people feel lack of confidence, when people are unsure that they can do something. For people that were starting to work out in the gym, telling them about everything that they can do was motivating. For people that have been using the gym for a while, telling them that there are all these new options actually did not affect their motivation because they already had their way. One thing to note is that when you add more links, okay, more the arrows here, you end up diluting the mental association between the means and the goal. Okay, and sometimes you see that people are more motivated to take an activity that helps them achieve one goal and not others because they perceive a strong connection. To give you an example, we see that sometimes consumers are interested in products that undermine some other goals, okay? So consumers prefer a mouthwash that stings, okay? They believe that it's healthier because it undermines the pleasant sensation, okay? Consumers prefer sometimes bitter medicine because they feel that it helps more because it undermines something else. Teenagers engage in risky behaviors partially because it is a greater signal of their connection to the group, of them being brave or whatever is important for them, if they are willing to undermine their personal safety by doing that. So let me stop sharing and move to another question that we received, which is from Blams Pineda. Can you comment on these principles when applied to an organization that is transformed significantly? Okay, so an industry that is facing digital disruption, that is changing. How do you stay motivated during a change? And I thought to refer this question to my panelists. So who wants to take it? Who has the experience with an organization that is transforming significantly?
I think from our side, we regularly put leaders in to lead digital transformation, particularly in industries that are being disrupted. And I think a lot comes from the person, the person that's looking to build that strategy and lead that transformation because of the culture, the elements. And I think that's probably a lot of the intrinsic, and that you need to have intrinsic motivation from the leader that builds through the team, because it's going to be a long journey. You hear the kind of cliche, you're building the plane while you're flying it, but there's often a kind of buying into that element of the strategy. I think there needs to be an allowance that you might not hit all your goals, that you actually may have an end goal, which is this kind of big golden digital transformation, but actually it's the kind of contribution goals you make along the way that are a big part of the journey. And you speak about in the book looking backwards and looking forwards. At the beginning, you're going to have to look backwards a lot. What have you achieved? What have you done? How have you got here? Well, we've come a long way since point B. And when you get closer to the finish and kind of the real achievements, then you start to look forwards. But I think a lot comes from the leader and the intrinsic motivations. And then you probably think about the extrinsic motivations later on.
Yeah, thank you. This is really helpful. I'm just going to move to the next question because I have a list of questions here, and I'm going to basically direct you to Yvonne. But you know, I'm kind of I'm choosing you, and you can pass the question to someone else. I will ask you about social media instant gratification. The feeling that people are these days much more motivated by what is exactly in front of their eyes and not by the long run. And the specific question was how would this trend where we are constantly going for the instant gratification impact the pay forward concepts and more societal goals such as altruism, raising families, sustainable investment, and so on. What's your take, Yvonne?
So I think on the first part of the question, I think this is the peer pressure that on the people wanting to be as well on the forefront. But there is something we need to bear in mind, that tomorrow, and when I look at what Greg said on looking forward, is different than looking backward. So the social aspects that will come in the looking forward are completely different attributes, to completely different fundamentals from what it was looking backward. So there is an adaptation as well to the new elements and that is coming forward.
I completely agree. I would say that I very much agree with the question. I don't have the person who asked the question, that we have a problem of creating a society of instant gratification that is now even more possible than before. That the idea of disconnecting from your feed is heartbreaking for people. We want to constantly be stimulated. There is really interesting data now showing that we are losing something by not having time to just daydream, okay, to just take off, to just do nothing. And so one intervention people can try is just find a few minutes in your day to just do nothing. Okay, and you'll find that ideas come to mind, the thoughts come to mind, but that means that you will really do nothing. Okay, this is not being on Twitter. This is just letting your thoughts take over and see where they take you. Let me move to another question. Tunde, I will ask you again, feel free to not have an answer and we'll keep going. But Ryan Schnell asked if we can give an example of a time when you had an incentive in place that led to the wrong behavior, and were you able to change the incentive to achieve the goal? So, and any example comes to your mind?
Okay. I'm thinking now. Yeah, so a large part of my business obviously is sales, and most sales are driven by commissions through agencies or sales agents. When we designed incentives in such a way that the commissions were just based on any type of product sold, rather than designing it in such a way that it benefits the company. So if you're selling a set of products, right, the product mix or the types of products you sell can increase your margins. But if you're just selling one type of product and then you incentivize significantly on that type of product, you find that other types of products are ignored. So trying to find a way to get a balance for people to sell different types of insurance products, for example, is an example of when we incentivize the wrong thing. Eventually, we changed that by communicating with the sales agents to let them understand why some of these other products needed to be sold together, and then change the incentive system to a point system where if you sell each type of product, then you get a point or get specific points assigned, and then come up with a global score rather than just the product on itself. I hope that's an example that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a great example. Thank you. Yvonne?
Yeah, I would like to add another example that drove a behavior across the company differently in Microsoft at a worldwide level. We used to do benchmark of people and rewards, base our rewards based on calibration. And like you have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like people they were competing. Then we changed our rewards, and like we adopted actually the growth mindset that you referred to, Professor, as a wide company culture. And we changed the rewards as well to 3 circles. One circle is around your individual contribution, but we put as well, how are you contributing to the success of others? And how are you building on the ideas of others? And you cannot imagine the behavior change in the organization of, instead of competing to be in the calibration number 1, people now are rewarded if they are helping others to succeed. And this it drove a whole cultural change as well. It was a driver as well in the cultural change.
Thank you. This is a great example. We only have we have time for only one question, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask all the 4 of us the same question coming from Lucas Galupo. And Lucas asked, if you could go back in time, how would you apply your knowledge in this subject, in particular to your life? So Greg, Yvonne, and Babatunde, you have time while I'm answering this question, but I will then refer to you. So just brief answer, you go back in time, how would you apply this knowledge? I will go first. I would say that I would be using my network and my friends and working with others more. That I have learned that that I can rely on the people around me more than I should. I probably was too individualistic in my thinking about my career and goals, and not using the help of the people around me as much as I could. Greg.
I think the all or nothing versus cumulative goals was one that resonated quite strongly with me, and the benefits of the last step in 10,000 steps a day versus 9,999. And I think really understanding the value of cumulative goals and not necessarily just anchoring on the all or nothing side of a goal.
Thank you, Babatunde.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really around, what drove me in terms of focus on money vis-a-vis intrinsic motivation and enjoying what I actually do. So you find that, yeah, you might get more money and you find that you're still less happy. So I think one of the key things for me would be actually looking at things a bit more deeply around why I do the things that I do, and taking a step forward that way.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Yvonne.
It's more around focus, and being calm is critical for me. This is where if I will look back, I would do differently.
All right, so thank you all. I'm always amazed by how little time is an hour. Okay, I have, I didn't cover half of the questions that we received, and nevertheless, we were able to have a great conversation, and I am so grateful to the three of you, Greg, Yvonne, and Babatunde, and the many people that joined our call today. I want to let you know that the recording will be available on the Faculty Fireside website. So hopefully if people missed our conversation or part of it, they can see it there. Hopefully we have built a community, or we contributed to building a community where we are going to communicate after this call, where we are going to continue talking about motivation and using each other's help in staying motivated, learning from each other, from our business experience, from the academic work that has been done. Please join us again for the next event, and very grateful to my panelists. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.